We often picture old farm life as peaceful, just quiet days and simple pleasures. But the truth of how rural families really lived before stores existed is a brutal wake-up call. They weren't just surviving, they were masters of their environment, constantly working, building, and fixing with their own two hands. Forget what you think you know. Their very lives depended on a set of backwoods skills we've completely lost today. Without them, most would have starved. But for these families, there was no backup plan. There was no one to call and no corner store to run to. Your survival and your family's survival depended completely on what you could build, grow, or fix right there with your own two hands. Number 1. Soap making from animal fat and ashes. Forget just grabbing a bar of soap at the store. Out here, you had to make it, and it was a grueling, all-day job. The process started by dripping water through hardwood ashes to create a harsh chemical called lye. Then you take melted animal fat and boil it with that lye for hours. The result wasn't fancy, but it was vital. This simple homemade soap was the frontline defense against infection and disease, making it an absolutely essential skill for survival. But keeping the family clean was one challenge, keeping them fed was another. Number 2. Home canning fruits and vegetables. A massive summer harvest was both a blessing and a curse. Without refrigerators, all that fresh food would rot long before winter arrived. This cycle of feast and famine changed in 1858 with the invention of the mason jar. Its simple, airtight seal meant families could safely preserve their fruits and vegetables for months. This wasn't about convenience, it was about survival. It meant having food in the dead of winter and avoiding deadly illnesses like botulism from spoiled food. But a full pantry was only one piece of the puzzle. Number 3. Sewing and mending clothing. Today, if we get a hole in our jeans, we just buy a new pair. But back then, fabric was a precious resource and nothing ever went to waste. Every single piece of clothing was expected to last for years, passed down until it was literally falling apart. A torn shirt wasn't the end. It was just a reason to get out the needle and thread. Women spent countless hours darning socks, patching knees, and turning old adult clothes into new outfits for the kids. But some things couldn't just be patched up. Number 4. Herbal remedies for common illnesses. When it wasn't a shirt that was torn but a person who was sick, there was no doctor to call. The family's medicine cabinet was whatever grew in the woods and fields right outside their door. A bad fever meant brewing a tea from willow bark, nature's original aspirin. A nasty cut could be treated with crushed yarrow leaves to help stop the bleeding. This knowledge was the only healthcare they had. Knowing which plants healed and which could harm was an essential skill that could literally save a life. Number 5. Smoking and curing meat. With no refrigerators, a freshly butchered hog could spoil in days. The solution was salt and smoke. First, they'd pack the meat in salt, which pulled out all the water. Since bacteria needs water to grow, this stopped rot completely. Then they'd hang it in a small smokehouse for weeks. The low, slow smoke acted like a protective, germ-killing shield. This wasn't about flavor, it was about survival. It was the only way to have a reliable source of protein to last through the harsh winter. But having food stored was one thing. Having a safe place to live was another. Number 6. Building furniture by hand. You couldn't just go buy a table or a bed. Every single piece of furniture had to be built from scratch, using whatever trees grew on your land, usually oak or pine. A man would fell a tree and shape the raw wood with simple hand tools. There were no screws or nails. Instead, they relied on clever woodworking joints, like the mortise and tenon, to lock pieces together tightly. It wasn't about looking pretty, it was about having a sturdy bed to sleep on and a table for the family. But a house full of furniture still needed one crucial thing to be livable. Number 7. Collecting and storing rainwater. Without faucets or indoor plumbing, getting water was a back-breaking daily chore. Families had to haul every single bucket from a well or a distant creek. A smarter way was to catch the rain right off the roof. Gutters would funnel rainwater into a large underground tank called a cistern, often built with brick or stone. This wasn't just a convenience, it was a lifeline. That stored water was used for cooking, cleaning, drinking, and watering the garden, saving hours of labor every single day. With a steady supply of water, the homestead was functional, but keeping it running through the dark, cold nights required a different kind of resource. Number 8. Foraging wild foods. The family garden and smokehouse couldn't provide everything. Knowing the difference between a safe berry and a poisonous one was a critical skill, passed down from parents to children. People foraged for wild greens, nuts, and mushrooms to supplement their meals. This wasn't just a little extra flavor. It was a free source of vital nutrients that kept the family healthy and stretched their food supply through lean times, ensuring there was always something on the table. But a full stomach didn't mean much if the house was freezing cold and pitch black. Number 9. raising livestock for daily needs. On a homestead, animals weren't just future meals, they were living, breathing tools. A family cow provided daily milk for butter and cheese, and its strength could help plow the fields. Pigs were a source of meat, but just as importantly, their fat was rendered into lard for cooking and making soap. And a small flock of chickens meant a reliable supply of fresh eggs. This was a complete system that provided food, labor, and materials right outside your door. Of course, managing a homestead full of animals and crops required more than just muscle. It required the right tools for the job. Number 10, making candles at home. Once the sun went down, the world went pitch black. The only way to see was to make your own light. Most families made tallow candles from melted down animal fat. The problem? They were greasy, smoky, and smelled terrible. The far better option was beeswax, which burned clean and bright. But to put the work into perspective, it often took the fat from an entire cow to supply one family with candles for a single winter. Every single hour of light was a hard-won, precious resource. But keeping a candle lit was one thing. Keeping the family warm was another battle entirely. Number 11, preserving seeds for future harvests. There was no hardware store to buy a packet of seeds from. A family's entire food supply for the next year depended on what they saved from this year's harvest. And you couldn't just save any old seeds. Farmers carefully chose seeds from their strongest, healthiest plants. This wasn't just a chore, it was a science. It meant that year after year, their crops got a little better, a little stronger, and perfectly suited to their own patch of land. This was the only crop insurance they had. But even with a barn full of seeds, a family wasn't safe if their house couldn't stand up to the weather. Number 12, grinding grain into flour. A barn full of harvested wheat was useless until you turned it into flour. And this wasn't a quick job. It meant spending hours every single day, hunched over two heavy stones called a quern, grinding the grain by hand. It was back-breaking work, usually done by women, just to make enough flour for that day's bread. Without this constant, exhausting effort, there was no bread on the table, which was often the main thing a family had to eat. But the work didn't stop once the bread was baked. The entire homestead needed constant upkeep, and you couldn't just buy what you needed to fix it. Number 13, trading goods through local barter networks. No matter how skilled your family was, you couldn't produce everything you needed. Maybe you had a surplus of eggs and milk, but your neighbor had a good apple harvest or was a skilled blacksmith. So you'd trade a dozen eggs for a basket of apples or a repaired plow for a sack of potatoes. This wasn't just a primitive economy, it was a survival network. It meant your community had your back, ensuring everyone got what they needed to get by through the year.